Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, having a conversation with the Director of Fiscal Studies for the Fraser Institute, Jake Fuss. Jake, thanks for being here. You mentioned Canada's economic picture and compared it, I guess we were talking about per capita GDP growth, compared it with the United States. Let's take a broader look, OECD countries, as they're called. How do we compare with those advanced economies?
Yeah, well, the OECD released a report in 2021 that has projections for GDP per capita growth over the next 40 years, really, for Canada compared to other advanced economies around the world. And what it found is that Canada is projected to be dead last in terms of projected growth in GDP per person from both 2020 to 2030 and from 2030 to 2060. So we're going to have, a bunch of countries like South Korea, New Zealand, Estonia actually surpass Canada over the next 40 years in terms of living standards. Not only are they going to be growing faster than us, they're actually going to have higher absolute value in terms of standard of living. So that's a big concern for Canada. I mean, obviously, this is not set in stone. There are things that we can do to actually improve our economic growth on a per person basis, but we're going to have to start reversing course on a lot of the policy things that we have going on right now at the federal level in order to actually change that trajectory sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, and I do want to get to that. I think that's important that we do discuss what kind of policy alternatives there are. Before we do, however, just again, the fact that our per capita growth is last. What does that translate to for the average Canadian? What does that mean in terms of their standard of living?
Yeah, exactly. So GDP per person is kind of a broad measure of income for a person. It's not going to be the exact same as maybe median employment income or something like that. But we're talking really about thousands of dollars of income for people. We're looking at averages here. So if you have countries, having double the growth rate that you have over a 20 or 40-year period, they could be surpassing you by thousands of dollars during that time. So your standard of living is much, much lower than some of these other countries when we're talking about those differences in growth rates. So it's not an insignificant amount. It's not just, a few $100s here or there. It's actually thousands of dollars over time.
Let's talk about, and I know you've written about this as well, business investment and its relationship to growth. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, business investment is really critical to innovation and things that we need in our economy, like productivity, ultimately getting more bang for your buck, getting more output per hour worked from workers. It's really critical for acquiring new equipment, new technologies, new tools for companies and businesses, allowing us to get new businesses or expanding current businesses as well. And what we've seen between 2014 and 2022, we saw business investment in Canada decline by almost 17% in inflation adjusted terms. Whereas something different is happening in the United States. They've actually increased significantly their business investment over the same time frame. So we can't just, kind of complain about this being a global phenomenon. We're having something happen in Canada that isn't necessarily happening in other advanced countries around the world. And this is a really concern for us because you ultimately need business investment to get that GDP per person increasing over time, to get job creation, to get higher standards of living for Canadians.
And to what do you attribute that decline in business investment and growth?
Well, I think it's a few factors. And one of the main things, too, is really the regulatory burden that we have right now in Canada. We've seen over the last number of years a whole bunch of bills being added that are really burdensome for businesses or projects to get done, major infrastructure projects in Canada. Things like Bill C-69, the Environmental Assessment Act, or Bill C-48, that was banning tanker traffic off the west coast or northwest coast in Canada. Those have had really a tangible impact on a lot of aspects of business investment in Canada. There's also a lot of uncertainty, especially in the oil and gas sector and other areas, as you have the federal government now adding in a whole host of new policies like clean fuel standards, cap on GHG emissions in Canada, and a whole host of other things that are coming in too right now. So we've really seen a massive increase in regulations right now. And it's not really helping Canada. It's really preventing a lot of potential business investment that we could be getting right now.
Yeah, because I guess the argument of the Liberal government is that by adopting these regulations, you're actually paving the way for a transformation of the Canadian economy to a more green economy, and that allows for greater jobs and investment in the future. We're going to take a break, but I want to get your response to that response by the federal government after the break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.